Are you ready for the adventure of a lifetime? That was the last thing Max said to the team before they began their climb. It was supposed to be an exhilarating challenge, a chance to conquer the infamous peak that had eluded so many before them. But none of us could have imagined how it would end. The day started with perfect weather. Clear skies, a gentle breeze, and the crisp air of the mountains filled our lungs as we ascended. Max, Sarah, Jake, and I were experienced climbers, confident in our abilities and eager to reach the summit. We joked and laughed, our spirits high as we pushed ourselves higher and higher. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, everything changed. A thick fog rolled in, so dense it seemed to swallow the mountain whole. The air grew colder, and an unsettling silence fell over us. Our radios crackled with static, but we paid it little mind. We were focused on reaching our next checkpoint. It wasn't long before the fog became suffocating. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, and every step felt like a leap into the unknown. We huddled together, trying to stay calm, but the tension was palpable. That's when we heard a faint sound, like a low, guttural growl, echoing through the mist. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. We all nodded, fear creeping into our hearts. The sound came again, closer this time. It was as if something was moving through the fog, circling us, unseen, but ever present. Max grabbed the radio, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. This is Max. We're experiencing something strange up here. Visibility is zero, and there's something out there with us. The radio crackled, but there was no response. Just more static. The silence that followed was unbearable. We were miles from base camp, with no way to communicate and no idea what was out there. Suddenly, the growling turned into a series of low, rhythmic thumps. It was as if the mountain itself was alive, its heartbeat echoing through the rocks. The ground beneath us trembled, and I could see the fear in everyone's eyes. Whatever it wasn't natural. "We need to move," Jake urged, his voice tight with panic. "We can't stay here." But as we tried to press on, the fog seemed to thicken, wrapping around us like a living thing. The growls grew louder, more aggressive, as if whatever was out there was getting closer. Every instinct screamed at us to run, but where would we go? There was nowhere to hide. Max took the lead, guiding us through the fog as best he could. But it was no use. The sounds followed us, growing louder, more menacing. We were being hunted, and we knew it. Then, just when we thought it couldn't get any worse, the ground gave way beneath us. Jake and Sarah screamed as they tumbled into the darkness. Max and I scrambled to the edge, our hearts pounding in our chests. But there was no sign of them, just the endless fog and the echo of their screams. This is Max," he shouted into the radio, desperation in his voice. "We've lost 2 team members. We need help, now." The radio crackled to life, but instead of a response from base, all we heard was that same low growl, now right next to us. Max and I exchanged a terrified glance. Whatever was out there had found us. We ran, the fog closing in on us, the growls echoing in our ears. The mountain seemed to twist and turn, leading us in circles. The panic was overwhelming. I could barely breathe, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what was happening. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the growling stopped. The fog began to lift, revealing a desolate, rocky landscape. We were alone, no sign of Jake, Sarah, or whatever had been chasing us. But the fear remained, our gnawing dread that something was still watching us. Max grabbed the radio one last time. "Base, this is Max. If anyone can hear us, we're not alone up here. Something is hunting us. Please send help." That was the last transmission we sent before the radio went dead. The fog rolled back in thicker than ever, and we were swallowed by the mountain. The growls returned, closer than before, and I knew then that we weren't going to make it. In the end, it wasn't the mountain that claimed us, but whatever lurked within it. We disappeared, just like so many before us, our final moments lost to the mist. But our story isn't over. The mountain still stands, and the sounds of our last climb still echo through its peaks. If you ever find yourself drawn to the summit, remember our tale. Some climbs aren't meant to be conquered, and some places aren't meant to be disturbed. Because once you hear the growl of the mountain, it's already too late. Every climber dreams of reaching a peak that no one else has conquered. For us, that peak was the vanishing peak, a mysterious summit that appeared on no map, whispered about in hushed tones by locals who warned us to stay away. But we were drawn to it, eager to make our mark. The day we set out was perfect. The sun was bright, the air crisp, and the path ahead clear. There were 5 of us: Mark, Lisa, Tony, Rachel, and me, some seasoned climbers who had tackled some of the toughest mountains around. But nothing could have prepared us for what we would face. As we ascended, the mountain seemed to shift beneath our feet as if it were alive. The trail twisted and turned in ways that didn't make sense. What should have been a straightforward climb became a labyrinth of rock and snow. But we pressed on, determined to reach the top. Hours passed, and the landscape grew more surreal. The sky darkened unnaturally, and the air felt heavy, almost oppressive. We should have turned back, but the peak was in sight, tantalizingly close. It seemed to beckon us, drawing us in with the promise of victory. When we finally reached the summit, we stood in awe of the view, at least what we could see of it. The landscape below us was shrouded in mist, the world below fading in and out of focus. It was as if the mountain had lifted us into another realm, separate from the world we knew. But the elation was short-lived. As we celebrated, we noticed something strange. The peak beneath our feet seemed to be dissolving, the rocks crumbling into nothingness. Panic set in as we realized that the very ground we stood on was vanishing. "What's happening?" Lisa gasped, her voice tinged with fear. The mountain, it seemed, was rejecting us. The summit we had worked so hard to reach was disappearing before our eyes, leaving us stranded on a fragment of reality that was quickly unraveling. We tried to descend, but the path had changed. The route we had taken was gone, replaced by sheer drops and impossible cliffs. Mark, ever the leader, tried to keep us calm. "We need to stick together," he said, though I could see the fear in his eyes. "We'll find another way down." But as we moved, the world around us continued to warp. The landscape shifted and twisted, turning familiar paths into dead ends and solid ground into crumbling voids. The sky above was a swirling vortex of clouds, and the air buzzed with a low, humming sound that set our nerves on edge. Then, the hallucinations began. I saw shadows moving just beyond my vision, figures that vanished when I turned to look. The others saw them too, dark, ghostly shapes that seemed to mark us, always just out of reach. Tony swore he heard voices, whispering our names, calling us deeper into the mountain's grip. "We have to get out of here," Rachel said, her voice trembling. But what was real, the mountain had twisted reality so completely that we no longer trusted our own senses. Every step felt like a gamble, every decision fraught with the fear that it would lead us further into the nightmare. Hours passed, or maybe days time had lost all meaning. Exhaustion set in, and our minds began to fray. Tony was the first to break. He sprinted ahead, screaming that he had found a way out, but when we caught up, he was gone. The path ahead led only to a sheer drop, and his voice echoed from the abyss below. The rest of us were on the brink of collapse. The mountain had become a maze, its peaks and valleys shifting with every step. We were trapped, caught in a nightmare where the rules of reality no longer applied. I could feel the mountain's presence, a cold, indifferent force that watched us struggle, amused by our despair. In the end, it was Mark who made the decision. "We can't fight this," he said, his voice hollow. "We need to stop and wait it out." So we sat, huddled together on a shrinking ledge as the world around us continued to unravel. The mist closed in, obscuring everything but our own fear. The peak we had climbed so hard to reach was gone, dissolved into the void. The mountain had taken it by, and it was taking us with it. Just when I thought we would disappear completely, something changed. The mist began to lift, the ground solidified beneath us, and the path down reappeared as if it had never been gone. The mountain, it seemed, had tired of its game, but the cost had been high. Only 3 of us made it back broken, haunted by what we had seen. The vanishing peak had claimed 2 of our friends and left us with memories that would never fade. We had reached the summit, but we had lost ourselves in the process. As we descended, I looked back at the peak, now shrouded in clouds, and felt a shiver of dread. The mountain had let us go, but its grip on our minds would never loosen. We had climbed into the unknown and found not glory, but terror. And we would carry the weight of that climb with us forever. Adventure calls to the brave, but sometimes the journey takes you where you should never go. That's what we discovered when we ventured into the cursed woods, a place where legends warned the trees were alive and the paths led only to darkness. It was a crisp autumn morning when we set out, 5 of us eager to conquer the mysterious forest that had intrigued us for years. I remember the excitement in our group. Emma, the fearless leader. Josh, the map expert. Mia, always ready with a joke. Lucas, the quiet observer. And me, Sarah, the one who couldn't resist a challenge. The entrance to the cursed woods was marked by an ancient, weathered sign that read, "Enter at your own risk." We laughed it off, confident that we could handle whatever the woods had in store. After all, we were experienced hikers, and the idea of a cursed forest seemed like nothing more than a spooky tale. But as we ventured deeper, the atmosphere shifted. The trees, tall and gnarled, seemed to close in on us, their branches reaching out like twisted fingers. The air grew colder, and the light of day struggled to penetrate the thick canopy above. It was as if the woods were alive, watching us with unseen eyes. The path, once clear and wide, began to narrow, twisting in ways that defied logic. Josh checked the map repeatedly, but nothing made sense. The trail markers were gone, replaced by dense underbrush and shadowy corridors that led us deeper into the heart of the forest. Anyone else feeling a bit uneasy? Mia joked, though her voice trembled slightly. We all nodded, the unease settling in our chests. The forest was silent, too silent, as if all the creatures had fled, leaving us alone with whatever lurked in the shadows. and then we heard a soft rustling, like the sound of leaves brushing together, but there was no wind. "Did you hear that?" Lucas asked, his voice barely a whisper. We stopped, straining to listen. The rustling grew louder, closer, and suddenly, the ground beneath us seemed to shift. Emma stumbled, catching herself just in time. The path we were on had moved, twisting like a living thing, leading us away from our original route. "This can't be happening," Josh muttered, checking the map again. "The path is gone." We were lost, and the realization hit us hard. The cursed woods were not just a story. They were real, and they were playing with us. We pressed on, hoping to find our way back, but the woods had other plans. The trees seemed to bend and twist, forming barriers that blocked our path, forcing us into narrow, dark tunnels of foliage. The deeper we went, the darker it became. The light faded until it was just a dim glow, barely enough to see by. The air grew thick, oppressive, and the rustling followed us, an ever-present reminder that we were not alone. The trees seemed to pulse with life, their bark shifting as if they were breathing. Mia was the first to panic. She insisted she saw something moving in the shadows, a figure that darted between the trees. Always just out of sight. We tried to reassure her, but the fear was contagious. I could feel it too. Something was out there, watching us, waiting. We picked up the pace, but the forest twisted and turned, leading us in circles. The path was gone, replaced by a labyrinth of darkness. Every step felt like we were walking deeper into a trap. The rustling grew louder, more insistent, and now there were whispers of unintelligible murmurs that filled the air, making the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. "Stop, everyone, stop," Emma called out, her voice shaking. We gathered together, huddling close. The whispers surrounded us, echoing through the trees. It was like the forest was speaking to us, telling us to turn back, but there was no way out. The paths had merged into a single tunnel of darkness, and we were being funneled into it. Suddenly, Lucas screamed. We turned to see him thrashing against an unseen force, his body lifted off the ground as if the trees themselves had come alive. We rushed to help him, but the branches wrapped around him, pulling him deeper into the forest. His screams were muffled, then silenced as he was swallowed by the darkness. Panic took over. We ran, stumbling over roots and rocks, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, as if the forest was angry. The ground beneath us shifted again, sending us tumbling down a steep slope. We landed in a small clearing, breathless and terrified. In the center of the clearing stood a tree unlike any after its bark blackened, twisted into a grotesque shape. The air around it was thick with the scent of decay, and at its base, we saw them, bones, scattered and broken, remnants of those who had come before us. The whispers became screams, a cacophony of voices that filled our heads, driving us to the brink of madness. "This is it," Emma whispered, her face pale. "We're not getting out." The realization was cold, sinking into our bones. The cursed woods had taken Lucas, and now it was coming for us. We huddled together, too exhausted to run, knowing that no matter what we did, the forest would have its way. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the noise stopped. The forest fell silent, the air still. The path before us reappeared, clear and wide, leading out of the woods. But we knew better than to trust it. With no other choice, we followed the path, our hearts heavy with the loss of Lucas and the terror we had faced. The woods let us go. but the memory of what happened would haunt us forever. As we stepped out of the cursed woods and into the light of day, I looked back one last time. The trees stood tall and silent, their secrets hidden once more. But I knew that those who entered would never be the same. The cursed woods had shown us its true face, and it was something I would never forget. The darkness, the whispers, the living trees, it was all real, and it was waiting for the next group of adventurers to make the same mistake we did. Thanks for joining us on this spine-chilling journey into the unknown. If you enjoyed these eerie tales and spine-tingling stories, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Have your own creepy experiences or know a legend that needs to be told? Drop them in the comments or send us a message. And remember, the world is full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered. Stay curious, stay cautious, and until next time, keep your lights on and your eyes open. Sweet nightmares.